Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Real Life Process Podcast. As you can see, if you're watching on our YouTube channel or if you're just listening in, I have a couple of great guests today. They're joining me for this episode of the podcast. So I'm going to get to it because we don't want to waste any time of the time that we have together to just pick the grains. How about the brains of these two great leaders? So John Sanders and Les Hughes, welcome to the Real Life Process Podcast.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so much,
Teresa.
Teresa.
Yeah. So we are going to pull out as much as we can in these next 25, 30 minutes together. So I'm going to get right to it. Both of you have come together in a business called EntrePastors. And we'll come back around to why it's important to call it a business and say what it is. But would each of you mind? I know your stories well, but my audience does not. Just taking a couple of minutes each to just share where you come from and then also how this came together to form this business that you have. So whoever wants to go first, guys, I'll let you dive in.
Age before beauty. So since I'm younger, I'll go first. How about that?
I love it.
So
Go, man.
yeah. So my name's John Sanders. I grew up in pastoral ministry. My dad was a pastor, and as best I tried to outrun that calling on my life, God caught up with me, and really, I knew that He wanted me to serve in that capacity for at least for a season, to preach the gospel, to lead a church. And I tried my best to outrun that, but I went into a career in the fire service as a young man and thought, maybe I could do that for all of my life. And God just messed up my plans. And at a young age of, I don't know, maybe 23, something like that, I surrendered to the Lord fully in that way and just said, God, if you want me to serve like this, I think it's a mistake, but I'll go, I'll be obedient. And I had a long list of reasons why I thought this was not going to work, but, went into church planting. My wife and I planted a church and led that for 17 years. And in recent years of my life, my life has been on a really interesting journey of going back into the fire service as a full-time firefighter and also launching some businesses and really leaning into that entrepreneurial thing that has always been a part of my life. I just didn't recognize it. For years, God used that in church planting. We launched not only one church, but multiple locations of that church. And so just really in the recent years, as I've worked through some of the mindset stuff, the hangups that I had around, is it okay for me to be more than just a pastor? Is it okay for me to be out in the marketplace and earning money and actually earning decent money? Like out of that has come this EntrePastors, where we're now serving pastors. I'll let Les share more of the story of how we met, but that's kind of a high level overview to me and my story.
Yeah, thanks, John. Les, how about you, friend?
Yeah, there are some similarities. I also grew up in a pastor's home. My dad, for a good bit, was bivocational, co-vocational for a while, and then about the time my brothers and I were getting out of the house, he really became more of a what we would refer to as a full-time, staff position at a local church. But so I've seen both of those worlds. He also had a very entrepreneurial spirit, so it wasn't unusual at all for him to have his hands and feet in several things as we were growing up. And that was fun because he included us in some of that as well. So fast forward to the point where I sensed a call on my life to go ahead and be in pastoral ministries, and God opened up some doors to do that. And at about 20 to 25 years into that journey, came up against some real different types of leaders that had a different agenda than the one I had, even as lead pastor of a church. And I learned through that process that people will use money and income to leverage, and get their way. That was not cool to me. And so at that point in time, it just kind of lit a fire under me that I'm going to continue to do what God's called me to do, but I will not, it's just not wise to depend upon one primary stream of revenue for the livelihood of my family, to take care of my family. And so began to look at some other ways that I could use the gifts and the skills that God had given me in a different way, to plan for my family's future and current livelihood. So I got into a couple of groups of like-minded people. One of those was the same group that we're in, our mastermind group,
Mm-hmm.
and then a guy named John Sanders joined. When John joined, there were many of us that had some sort of, ministry or church related background of some kind. And then, but when John joined, there was a quickly a kindred spirit there, and we began in those conversations just sharing the same burden that we had over people that have been called to ministry, but in one way or another, it's they just need some other sources of income or revenue, or maybe they've, spent, like a lot of people that we know now, they're in their mid 50s, and that seems to be the point where a lot of them are let go by their churches, or else they get burned out, or they self-sabotage. We're getting down into some weeds now, but that's just the world we're in. And
Mm-hmm.
we began to talk about what if there wasn't anybody that we could find that would really speak into that and had some answers for that. And we just began to dream and say, well, what if we did it? What if we did that? And then we started combining this entrepreneur world with the pastoral world, not only for pastors, but that was our focus. And then we created EntrePastors, and now the rest is history, and
The
here we
rest
are.
is history, as we say. I had the privilege, I don't know, it's probably been 6 to 9 months ago, of being on John and Les's podcast. So make note of that. We'll put it in the show notes. They have a podcast as well that might be right up your alley that you want to start tuning into. And because most of our listeners know my background is also in vocational ministry, and I spent almost 15 years in that space, either part time or full time. And so it's a heart for me, as well as we all have that same heart. And one of the things we thought we might explore today, because with that space, and this doesn't just go for people that have been in a paid position in ministry, but if you've been involved, you've been a leader, you've been one of those people that's always the teacher in the Sunday school class or in the Bible study or any of those places where you feel that you're doing ministry. And then all of a sudden you decide, gosh, I'd kind of like to put on a little bit of an entrepreneurial hat too. Uh, there becomes this tug around the money mindset part of things. I think it happens on both sides of the fence, and I'd love to explore that with you guys today. And what I mean by both sides, I think it happens in the mind of the person. Like, now I'm offering some of the same wisdom and teaching and skill set, as you said, Les, that I used here for the Lord's work, and I'm using it for my work. And mine not meaning, I'm holding it tight and it's not of God, but I'm using it in a different way. And then there's the person who's experienced you, maybe in the Bible study or this, that's going, well, what are you doing now? Like,
Mm.
how did you flip that switch? So I would love to take you two, as you sat in those pastor roles and you've made the switch, and let's just explore that piece for people, because I think it holds back some of the best of who we are,
Mm.
when we cannot see that God has more for us to do, and He wants to bless us in that way. And He maybe was using that earlier time to lead us right to where we are now. So, John, you want to kick us off? Let's explore it.
Yeah, I think one thing we need to acknowledge is that there's often a false dichotomy that exists in the minds of people that says, there's certain realms of life that are sacred that kind of belong to God. And, we're going to put ministry in that realm. And then there's more of a secular area where God doesn't care as much or have as much control over. And, that's just the people who get up Monday through Friday and go, run their business and do electrician work and mechanical work for people and teach school. Like, that's out in the secular world. And that's a false dichotomy. That
Mhm.
dichotomy does not really exist. Like, there's not a single square inch of this universe that Jesus Christ has not planted his flag, according to my worldview, my faith perspective, and declared his kingship over it. Like, it all belongs to him. And so when we start dividing it into this sacred secular realm, we look at the ministry side, the thing we call ministry, and we go, man, that has to be given at no cost or low cost. You can't charge for that. I mean, how dare you charge someone to help them spiritually? Like, we get it when we take our car to the mechanic and they charge us money to fix our transmission. We totally see that transaction of value that's taken place. But when it's more of an intangible thing and we're helping coach somebody, or we're helping counsel them and peel back some layers of their life and connect some dots in their story, it's hard to like put a transactional value on that. And so for a lot of us, we go, man, how could I even charge? And Teresa, you said it well. It's both sides of that. It's not only the people in the pews, so to speak, that have that. It also those of us in those leadership slash ministry roles. And I don't know which came first. It's the chicken or the egg, but it's
It's
real, in
it's the
the
false belief though that
yeah.
holds us back in our own mindset of, well, I used to do this for free, and now, now that I have a different skill set or training, or now that I'm putting it out there as a business. I love what you said. God's over all of it.
Hmm.
We're the ones that have created that. So Les, what's your thoughts there?
One of my thoughts is that how different or it's inconsistent for us to, for example, think of it's okay to buy a book. Like it's okay for somebody to write a book and there's some cost along with that. And so somebody will buy a book, but if I use the same content in the form of coaching, courses, mastermind. It's all it's my wisdom, my experience, my expertise, my maybe my insights. It's a different form, but for some reason we get all jacked up in our mindset. Some people do about the coaching or the mentoring or something of that or the mastermind, something to of that nature. But we'll walk right into a bookstore and pay 25, $30 for a book without batting an eye. It's the same, it's just a different deliverable. It's the
Mm.
same, it's a different manifestation of the same stuff.
And I wonder, because I have this in the community that I have where I help people, we certify people in the content that I have, and I'm helping them. And many times I'm helping them to sell their product, to sell their services and put a value, a dollar value on it on both sides. So, is there something of, if it's tangible and I can hold it in my hand, like you said, a book or whatever, that it seems to have, oh, that's okay, it's a dollar value. But if it's just words or questions or community, that doesn't have a value. John, what are
Mm,
your thoughts?
well, yeah.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
or
Les.
less. Either
No, I
way,
was just gonna say that that's precisely it. But the point there is we make that determination in our mind.
we do.
So we're back to mindset. That's the
Hmm.
thing. If we have a hang up, we have the hang up. You know what I mean? It's like not everybody has that hang up and it's not innate in what we're talking about. We've created that in our minds, right? So yes, I believe that what you just said, Teresa, is absolutely true, but it's because of the value that we've assigned to it, which is back to our mindset.
Hmm.
And I will take that a step deeper. 100% I agree that that thought process is there, tangible versus intangible. But I'm going to bring it back to this idea of ministry as well, because even a pastor who has a thriving business where they are selling a, tangible physical product, there is still a mindset around that by many in the church that would look at that and go, "Ooh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with a pastor who's making a lot of money." In our vernacular, in our tribe, we talk about blowing up the narrative of the starving pastor. Like, that's a thing.
Hmm.
No one calls it that because it sounds terrible when you say it out loud. But we are very comfortable. By we, I'm painting with a broad brush of kind of the evangelical church. We are very comfortable with the idea of a pastor that's not doing well financially. We get that. That makes sense to us. We don't see a place in our thinking for a pastor who is thriving financially. So it's not just is the product or the deliverable tangible or intangible. It gets back to that. Is it really okay for you to charge for this? We understand a doctor or a dentist or an attorney. Sure. We they can make a six-figure salary, no problem. But you're a pastor, you're in ministry. How dare you think about making that kind of money off of the people that you're serving? And so it really comes down to this: do I recognize that what I'm doing in serving other people has value? And in order for me to stay in that place to keep being able to serve and give and deliver, I have to be rewarded for that, or I'll go broke and I can't serve out of that empty cup for too long. I think that's in part why we see many pastors hitting that wall and burning out, as they've given and given and given. Now I have nothing left to give because I've just given it all away for free or for next to nothing, and now it's empty. The cup is just completely dry, I have nothing left.
And Les, you mentioned something. Oh, there's a couple of things I want to dive into there.
All
You
right.
mentioned something about even I'm 61. So, I'm beginning to think of, yeah, what's my next 10 years or 15 years or, different season of life than some are in. And so you brought up
Mhm,
even the idea of as pastors transition, right? Like,
mhm.
at least in the world that I came from in my pastoral role, we didn't have a retirement plan. Like there wasn't a retirement fund set up for me. I had no IRAs, any of that kind of thing. So,
Well, yeah.
as depending on your affiliation and all of that, it could be different. But I know that you all also run into so many pastors that are in that place of what do I want to do next? If I'm not going to
Right.
do this, or
Mhm,
this is not
mhm,
available for me to do, how am I preparing for the next
mhm,
season? So, and what's the mindset I have around that? Because
mhm.
if I'm always thinking, well, I can't be successful, um,
Right, right.
yeah.
Well, that's a great question, and, we see people from all of these stages, and by the way, even if at the local say, a local church or ministry level, if we have a board or, personnel committee or whatever it is, it's one thing to say, "Hey," to the 25-year-old pastor or 30-year-old pastor, "Hey, we wanna help you plan for the future. We have this system that's set up," or maybe you're in a denomination or a group that can do that. It's still, Teresa, many of them have small children, they're building a family
Mhm.
as well, and a well-meaning group of people may say, "We have a system to help you do that and prepare for the future, so just take whatever portion you wanna take out of your $20,000 salary to put toward retirement, you just feel free to go ahead and do that." I mean, come on. So,
That's what I mean.
many of us I don't know the stats, but I would say most people that have had a ministry background are not prepared well when that time comes. Life happens, right? And I think there is a mindset back to what John said, and then I'll get specifically to what you were asking. There is a mindset, this is a little bit different subject, but one of the reasons that some people in, the rank and file, you know, church member in some settings, there's a sense that they really want that minister to need them.
Mhm. Oh,
You know
that's
what I
that's what I
mean?
just wrote down. Like,
They really do, and there are different reasons for that, and as I said, we
mhm,
can that's a different conversation, but I've been doing this a while, and so has John, and so have you, and I just know that there are, not the majority, but there are some that are. I had a pastor now back to what you were asking me, this is the really cool part. I had a pastor of one of the largest churches in my area. I kinda knew him. We weren't really close at that time, but I knew him, certainly knew, the church. But we just happened to run in the same circles, but he contacted me one day and, wanted to know if we could have lunch, and so I thought, "Yeah, let's do it." So and in that conversation, he complete and we hadn't been John, it had only been a couple of months, I think, that since we had started EntrePastors, and he'd seen something probably pop up on a Facebook feed or something. He said, "I wanna ask you about EntrePastors," and I thought, "Well, okay, here, let's do it," because I didn't expect that, and he's that guy. He's in his mid-50s, very healthy, um, family life, very healthy as church life goes, a very healthy church life, not being pressured or forced in any way, but he sees those years coming, you know, doesn't wanna have a sense of urgency when the time comes, and so for the next 6 or 7 years, he wants to build something else. you know?
Exactly.
And as it turned out, he actually, I thought, because this guy's got a really good platform, he could be a podcaster as well. He's
Hmm.
speaks very well. He's got a great voice, and all that. He wanted to know about e-commerce. And so we
Interesting.
help people, yeah, we have about
Yeah.
3 general paths we help people with. One's the informational path, kind of the intellectual knowledge, and then an e-commerce, and then service-based as well.
Yeah.
And we have people in all of those veins, but we helped plug him into e-commerce, and now he and his wife are doing some, uh, fulfillment by Amazon and different things, and, I think he's having fun.
Well, and I want to explore that. But before we shift a little bit to kind of even how do you, I mean, because the mindset piece is a lot of it. And the thing about mindset is, you could work through it today and 2 weeks from now it's back, right? So
Right.
the value of being in community with guys like you that will help you reset, remember, because we didn't get there overnight. We don't get out of it overnight. But I just want to plug this in before we explore some of the ways you guys help people build businesses and go into the entree part of things. Is if you're listening and this isn't you, but you are the person on the other side of that. Um, how is God calling you to encourage and be the people in your church body, in your local congregation? Because many of you listeners are plugged in to these local congregations serving and ministering. How can you be an encourager to your leadership if they come and say, hey, I'm going to start up something that's going to be to invest in my family and to give to my family. And it's not going to take away to what I'm already doing, but I want to grow something on the side here. Are you going to be an encourager? Or are you going to be a discourager? Are you going to see the possibilities and what this makes possible? Or, like Les said, are you going to feel like, that takes away from my needs if you go do this? Because this conversation isn't just about the mindset of these men and women that are called into other things, but it's the mindset also of local church bodies and how, I mean, I think it's scriptural. Almost everyone you read about in scripture had an occupation. They were doing something. And so that's my own take and my own rant of just this is not just a call to the mindset, but it's a mindset shift for a whole culture. I don't know if either one of you want to say anything more about that before we explore some of
Yeah.
the ways you're doing this.
Put me down as a +1 on that, Teresa, because what we promote is a win-win for the
Mm-hmm.
pastor and the church. It turns out there's a lot of lost people in the marketplace who need the love of Jesus, and
Absolutely.
it's crazy when we get the leaders of the church out in the marketplace, the ministry opportunities that happen there. So this isn't a way that your church will suffer as your pastor thrives. Both will thrive. It's going to force a lot of really healthy boundaries and conversations and delegation to take place inside the church. And so I couldn't agree more, Teresa. Like, be an encourager. And just by the way, this may infuriate some, but we don't tell your pastor to ask your permission to do this. We encourage them to go do this with or without your permission. But I can tell you from experience, it's so much more life-giving when you have the blessing and support of your church behind you saying, "Pastor, go for it. We're excited for you. We're supportive. We're with you." And it's because I had that's part of my story. My church was very much blessed me to go back into full-time firefighting, to build a platform, a podcast on the side that was serving other pastors and churches. And so that was a huge blessing. I would have done it with or without their permission, but it helped having their encouragement and their blessing. So yes.
And maybe, just maybe, you're the person uh, that has an idea that you partner with your pastor or you're a part of helping them. You're investing in the business that they have or you're doing. I mean, so many times we see, and this is just coming to me off the top of my head, but we see people um, I'm giving to what if you invested in that guy's business, that man or woman's business or their startup or what they had to do, and you really became a part of the change for that family. Like there's just so many ideas that are possible in that way. So I don't know, Les, have you guys seen that happen within churches? Maybe I know you guys help people write books, right? And so maybe they want to write a book, and that would be a great platform for them. Maybe you're
Sure.
part of coming alongside to help finance that and get them started. I mean, what are some ways that have you guys seen that happen
Mhm.
within congregations as well?
Yeah, to answer your first question about partnering with someone else, I've actually done that, and,
Oh,
had a couple of men in a former place that I served who we it was back when the housing market was a lot better than it was. So this is before some of the downturns, but, yeah, we were, purchasing homes and then renovating them and flipping them or renting them out. Helped
hmm,
put one of my sons through college by getting out home,
awesome.
and he and some buddies rented it out, and it paid the mortgage for it, so he was kinda staying in that rent free. So, there are lots of examples. I've known other people to do something similar, just partnering. It's funny, you hear so many or some stories about how friends got in business together and it affected or ended the friendship. John and I were a little bit different. We were in business first and then became friends through that. Some people say that's a much better way to do it. It's worked out for us, so maybe there's something to that.
Ah, and I love that the example that you all give of even two pastors coming together to say, what could we do? How we both have skills, we both have different things. What could we do together? And so lots of ideas there in that. And before we move too far in wrapping up the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about how you all specifically. You said we have three kind of ways that we've seen uh, people shift. And I think I always love to share some just practical what's possible, because sometimes when you've been in a mindset for a long time of ministry work, you're like, what is out there? What could I do? How could I shift? So, John, share with us some ways that you're seeing that with pastors.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big issues. One of the several big issues that come up with pastors who come to us is, how could I ever do anything other than be a pastor? I have a seminary degree. I've
Exactly.
been in ministry for, however many decades, and I don't know anything else. And we help them see how those ministry skills that they've been using are very transferable to the marketplace. And so, as Les was saying earlier, we bring it down to three broad pathways. The first one, Teresa, is what you are doing. It's monetizing a message. It's building a business around a message, and that can look like a lot of things. Many of which you have done and are doing: writing a book, coaching, having courses, live events, a podcast. I mean, all of those things. You don't have to do all of them, but like there's a
Mm-hmm.
number of ways to monetize a message, and we think pastors are a great fit for that. They're great
It's kind of
content creators.
natural.
Yes. The other one is what Les was telling the story of earlier, e-commerce. We have a course that helps people get going selling on Amazon or eBay, if that's more of something that lights you up. And then the third is the broad pathway we call service-based business. So that's more of a hands-on, tree trimming, pressure washing, handyman, those types of things where you show up and deliver a tangible physical service to
Hmm.
someone. So we've got pastors in our community and non-pastors, by the way. That's we have kind of a larger following than just pastors, but we have people in all those different pathways that are thriving and finding success, and we love sharing their stories on our podcast. So that's kind of the three big pathways.
I love the clarity of those though, because I think again, it's super tangible to say, could see myself in a service-based business. I've always loved to do whatever, fix cars, work outside in landscaping or, do certain things. So that's so
Yeah.
tangible. The message part that I've done, as you said, I mean, we know a lot of pastors that have taken that platform that they're passionate about, either through life story or through a message that they just feel God has laid on their heart to share in a bigger way than just inside their congregation. And then just that e commerce business. So I love the tangibility of all three. And for those of you listening, you might be go, wow, that's an idea. That's a place. I want to connect. I want to know more. Les, you were going to share something there too. So, um,
Well, you mentioned writing before, and it could be that and to speak to the person that's maybe in the church that's got a trying to grow a platform or has a message. A lot of pastors can write, but they may
Mhm.
not have the broad platform or network or desire to have that. And so there's another way to partner together to put their story or your content or your message or platform into book form. And there are a lot of pastors, especially if they've um, done some work in the area of research and communication and writing, that they can take those skills and help you as well.
And as someone who has just put out a book just a few months ago, I can't say enough about how, if that is something that's on your heart, getting your message in book form, and Lesson John can help you do that as well. That's another kind of service area that they provide. Um, Getting it in book form can be a catalyst for your voice and for that to come forth in you. And I will say this too, for clarity of what you want to say as you work through and get coached through and help to come to that. So can't say enough about that. May be a jumping off point.
Mm.
Guys, we could talk for another 30 minutes, I'm sure, but I love how we've unpacked, like, start with your mindset. Start with this whole mindset that you have, or that you may feel, it may be a false belief that others have about what this can be as an entree pastor. But then going, and here are ways that I could actually explore that. And I can't say enough, that these are the two guys that you want to do that with. And they have lots of ways because they are entrepreneur mindset people. They have lots of ways. So, John, Les, tell us about some of the ways that people can dive in with you, that they can find you out in the big wide world. And what could be some stepping in points into this kind of work that you're doing to help lead and guide?
Yeah, well, I'll share some of the platforms and then I'll let Les tell about a resource that's available if that's okay. So, first, we just direct people to our website, EntrePastors.com. Certainly, our podcast is where we probably create the most content on a weekly
Mm-hmm.
basis. And, we have a Facebook community that's free. We would invite anybody, if this message resonates with you, just go to Facebook and search for EntrePastors Connect. So those are some of the big platforms to find us on. And then Les, if you want to share about the resource, go right ahead.
Yeah, a lot of what we were talking about earlier in terms of mindset and more. If you want a resource to do some self-evaluation and think about some next steps, just go to entrepastors.com/money mindset, and you can get that and download it or print it out. And there's also a video teaching, just a segment of some teaching that we did on the subject as well. So totally free. You're welcome to get that if you'd like.
Oh, love that. So that'll all be in our show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube or listening to the podcast, you can get those links through all of those places. Guys, thanks for being with me today and just
Thank you,
unpacking
Teresa.
just a sliver, just a sliver, just a taste of the wonderful work that you're doing out in the world. And, I will say this too. You may be listening and say, I want to pass this on to someone. I know a pastor. I know someone who needs to hear and needs to meet John and Les. Um, Share this out, share this resource, send it to them in an email or a text message or whatever, because this may not be you, but I bet you know someone that this is exactly. So as we wrap up today, I just want to say, remember that every moment, every day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. This has been a fun one for me today, guys, on a Wednesday morning. So thanks for joining me. We'll be back next week with more from the Real Life Process podcast.